I know what it's like when the pain seems bigger than yourself. Those moments when you wake up and feel the weight of the world on your shoulders before you've even set foot on the ground. The way your chest tightens when a painful memory appears without warning, like an unwelcome visitor who didn't have the decency to knock on the door. You try to push the feeling away, but it insists on staying, like a shadow that refuses to disappear even when the clouds cover the sun. Have you ever wondered why some pains seem to come back in cycles? As if the universe had a secret calendar to revisit us with the same challenges. That "not again" feeling when we realize we're facing a new version of an old problem. It's like cleaning a table that always accumulates dust, no matter how many times you wipe it down. And then comes that question we all ask ourselves in silence. Why me? Why this way? Why now? I've observed how we human beings are masters at avoiding discomfort. We dodge pain like we dodge a pothole. We create alternative routes in our lives, bypassing anything that might make us feel vulnerable. We buy things to distract ourselves, fill our diaries so we don't have time to feel, create superficial conversations to avoid deep dives. And yet, in the silence of the night, that pain is still there, patient, waiting to be heard. The most curious thing is that even in the most sincere conversations with close friends, we rarely talk about this pain in its essence. We mention the facts, we recount the events, but that aching core inside us remains untouched, like a well-kept secret, as if there were an unwritten rule that some wounds are too private to be shared. And so we carry this weight alone, mistakenly believing that others won't understand, or worse, that they don't carry similar burdens. I know what it's like when your mind becomes your worst enemy. Those thoughts that arrive like uninvited visitors at 3 in the morning. The way you replay conversations and situations, wondering what you could have said or done differently. How your brain seems programmed to find exactly that memory that hurts the most, just when you're trying to rest. It's almost as if the pain has an intelligence of its own, knowing precisely when and how to appear. We often feel ashamed of our pain, as if suffering were some kind of personal failure in a world that values constant happiness. We hide tears in public toilets, force smiles at family gatherings, and automatically answer, "I'm fine," when someone asks how we are. We create a character for the outside world that seems to have everything under control, while inside we struggle to keep the pieces together. This division, this emotional double life, is exhausting in itself. Have you ever noticed how some wounds seem to awaken at the slightest touch? How certain words or gestures from other people can instantly bring us back to a place of pain, even when the comment seemed harmless. It's like having an invisible bruise that no one else can see, but which hurts intensely when someone unknowingly presses on that exact spot. And then we react in ways that others don't understand because they can't see what has been touched inside us. There's something almost mysterious about the way our pain seems to know the ways of our being better than we do. It knows exactly where our doubts live, our deepest fears, our oldest insecurities. It navigates the corridors of our soul with the familiarity of someone who knows every corner. Sometimes it seems as if it has been there before we were even aware of ourselves, as if it were part of our original project, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. What few people admit is how intimate we become with our pain. How, over time, it becomes a kind of familiar companion. Even when we say we want to get rid of it, there is a strange reluctance, an unconscious attachment. Because we know this pain. We know its name, its shape, its weight. And the unknown that would come after it can somehow seem more frightening than the pain itself that we've already learned to live with. Have you ever found yourself wondering if this pain will ever end? Whether there's a set number of tears we need to shed before the well finally runs dry? Or if perhaps this is simply the nature of life, waves of pain and relief that come and go like the tide, never really stopping? For in moments of clarity, we can realize that the same pain that seemed unbearable to us yesterday, today seems just a distant echo, as if our heart had a natural healing system that works in silence, without us realizing. Sometimes, when I'm watching people in the street, I can see beyond the smiles and casual conversations. I see little signs of the pain each person carries, a distant look, a sudden sigh, a moment of silence in the middle of a sentence. It's as if we're all walking around with an untold story, an invisible weight. And then I realize that there is a silent language between those who suffer, a mutual recognition that needs no words. As if our pains could somehow communicate with each other on a level that our consciousness cannot reach. What is perhaps most difficult to accept is that there is no simple answer to the question, why am I suffering? We humans are storytellers by nature. We want clear narratives with a beginning, middle, and end. We want to know that there is a purpose, a meaning, a lesson to be learnt. And maybe there is. But maybe that answer doesn't come directly like a package delivered to our door. Perhaps it will reveal itself slowly, like an old photograph emerging into the developing liquid, its contours gradually appearing until we can finally see the full picture. Have you ever noticed how a seed needs to break down completely in order for the plant to be born? That hard little shell has to crack open in a way that, if the seed could feel it, would probably be painful. But without that break, without that small death, new life couldn't emerge. Sometimes I think that our pain works in a similar way, a necessary rupture so that something new can emerge within us. It's not that pain is good in itself, but it can be the process through which we grow in ways that would otherwise be impossible. There is an ancient Japanese technique called kintsugi, where broken vases are repaired with gold. Instead of hiding the cracks, they highlight them, turning them into the most beautiful part of the object. The scars are not disguised, but honored, even celebrated. Imagine if we could look at our own wounds in this way, not as defects to be hidden, but as golden lines that tell the story of our resistance. Because in truth, it's not the absence of scars that makes us beautiful, but what we choose to do with them. Think about how nature deals with destruction. A forest devastated by fire doesn't remain ashes forever. Slowly, new shoots appear. The green returns, first timidly, then with renewed strength. Certain seeds, in fact, only germinate after the extreme heat of a fire. It's almost as if the destruction was part of the plan, a necessary reset. Our pain can work like that, an emotional fire that, despite everything burning in its path, prepares the soil for a kind of growth that wouldn't be possible otherwise. Have you ever noticed how the moments of greatest expansion in your life have come after periods of intense discomfort? Just as an airplane has to face air resistance in order to gain altitude, it seems that we also have to face resistance in order to rise. The effort to push against that which pushes us down creates a strength in us that we wouldn't have discovered otherwise. If we could see our pain from this perspective, not as an obstacle, but as the very wind beneath our wings, perhaps we could finally understand its purpose. When you bake a cake, there's that moment when all the ingredients are mixed together in the bowl. Flour, eggs, sugar separate, each has its own flavor, its own texture. Together, they form a raw dough which is not yet what it's meant to be. It takes the heat of the oven, an uncomfortable, even hostile environment, to transform that mixture into something new and delicious. Our pain can be that oven. Difficult circumstances are the transforming heat that, although unpleasant, is creating something in us that couldn't exist otherwise. Fishermen know that oysters create pearls in response to irritation. A grain of sand enters the shell, and what does the oyster do? It can't expel it, so it surrounds that source of discomfort with the only thing it has, its very being. Layer after layer, it transforms what hurts it into something precious. And perhaps that's what we're being invited to do with our pain, not deny it or expel it, but wrap it up with everything we are until it becomes something else, until it becomes a pearl. There is a phenomenon in astronomy called radiation pressure. It's the force that light exerts on the objects it illuminates. As subtle as it is, it's what prevents some stars from collapsing under their own weight. I wonder if our brightest moments, our insights, our understandings, our flashes of clarity don't work in the same way. Perhaps they are that delicate pressure that prevents us from collapsing when the weight of pain seems too great to bear. When you walk along the beach and watch the waves, there is a constant rhythm, advancing and retreating, arrival and departure. As powerful as the ocean is, it never stays completely still. The tide rises, then falls. Nature teaches us that nothing is permanent, not even pain that seems eternal. Like the waves, it has its own cycle, its own rhythm. Knowing this rhythm doesn't make the wave any less wet or the pain any less painful, but it does give us the certainty that, like the tide, it too will recede. And in this knowledge, we find the strength to remain standing while the waters move around us. Have you ever noticed how small children deal with falls? They fall, cry instantly, and the next minute they're running again, their skinned knee already forgotten. It's not that they feel less pain, the physical wound is real. but they don't build a story around that pain. They don't carry it beyond the present moment. As we grow up, we learn to develop complex narratives around our suffering. It always happens to me, I'll never get over it, nobody understands. And so the original pain gains layers of meaning that make it heavier than it needs to be. Scientists have discovered that during metamorphosis, when a caterpillar turns into a butterfly inside its cocoon, its body literally dissolves. It's not just a modification, it's a complete dissolution followed by a reconstruction. Entire organs fall apart and are reorganized. It's a process that, from the outside, seems chaotic, even destructive. But from this apparent destruction, a whole new creature emerges capable of flight. Sometimes our most painful periods are just that, a necessary dissolution that precedes a flight we never imagined possible. There is a story about a young man who asked a wise old man how to become strong. The sage took him to a young oak tree and asked him to pull it out of the ground. The young man succeeded easily. Then they went to a slightly larger oak which took more effort, but they were still able to pull it out. Finally, they reached a huge oak tree which the young man couldn't move a centimeter. "That's how you become strong," said the wise man. "When the winds of adversity blow, you take deeper root." Our pain, like those winds, forces us to put down roots that we would otherwise never develop. Have you ever experienced that moment after crying intensely, when a strange peace seems to take over? It's as if something has been cleansed inside you. Scientists would say it's just hormones being released, but there's something else going on there. A kind of emotional cleansing, a restoration. The ancient Greeks had a concept for this: catharsis, the emotional purification that comes after deeply experiencing a feeling. Perhaps our pain is the path to this catharsis, a strong, turbulent river that, once it has passed, leaves everything cleaner than it was before. There is a subtle, almost imperceptible moment when we start to look at our pain instead of just feeling it. It's like taking a step back from a painting to see the whole picture, rather than having your nose glued to the canvas and seeing only seemingly random brushstrokes. This small distance doesn't diminish the pain, but it does change our relationship with it. Suddenly, we begin to perceive patterns, connections, a larger context. This first step, simply observing our pain with curiosity rather than resistance, is perhaps the most powerful move we can make. Have you noticed how quick we are to create stories about our pain? "I'm suffering because I'm not enough. This happened because I deserve it. I'll never get over it." And then we live not only with the original pain, but with the full weight of these interpretations. The truth is that pain and suffering are not the same thing. Pain is inevitable, a natural response to loss, disappointment, and change. But suffering is the story we create about that pain. And unlike pain, which is often beyond our control, stories can be rewritten. We can learn to say, "I'm feeling pain," instead of "I'm a broken person." There is a mysterious beauty in allowing yourself to be completely present with your pain. Not trying to escape it, not trying to fix it, not trying to understand it, just letting it be. Like when you finally stop fighting the current of a river and just float. It's a fascinating paradox. The more we resist what hurts, the more power we give it. It's like squeezing a handful of sand. The harder you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. But when you open your hand and simply hold it, the sand remains. Sometimes the path through pain begins with accepting that it's here and now, and that's all we need to know right now. Modern science has confirmed what the ancients already knew. Our emotions live in the body. Emotional pain is not just an abstract mental state, it has a physical presence. That knot in the stomach, the tension in the shoulders, the tight chest. Our body carries our history, our joy, and our pain, and holds truths that our conscious mind often doesn't recognize. That's why the way to understand the message of pain often passes through the body, feeling where it physically lodges, giving it space to express itself. It's no coincidence that many ancient cultures used movement, dance, and song as forms of emotional processing. Have you ever noticed how nature works in cycles? Day and night, seasons, phases of the moon, everything moves in rhythms of expansion and contraction, activity and rest. We humans, however, expect constant growth, linear progress, an ever-ascending line. And then we are surprised and disappointed when we encounter periods of contraction, of apparent regression, of darkness. But what if these periods were as necessary as winter is for the earth? The time when, beneath the surface, out of sight, essential work is going on? Perhaps our pain is not a diversion from the path, but an integral part of it. There is an ancient wisdom that says that the same water that softens the potato hardens the egg. It's not the water that determines the outcome, but the nature of what is subjected to it. In the same way, suffering in itself doesn't determine who we become. It's our essential nature, our deepest values, our worldview that determines how that experience will mold us. Two brothers can go through the same difficult childhood, and one becomes bitter while the other develops deep compassion. Pain is the fire that can either forge a sword or destroy it completely, depending on the metal and the smith. There is a phenomenon called post-traumatic growth that psychologists have been studying more and more. It's the idea that after deeply challenging experiences, many people not only regain their previous level of well-being, but actually grow beyond it. They develop a deeper appreciation for life, more meaningful relationships, a stronger sense of personal strength, new possibilities, and spiritual growth. It's not that trauma is good or desirable, it never is. But it's as if, forced to rebuild our lives after the storm, many of us end up building something stronger, more authentic, and more in line with who we really are. One of the most liberating discoveries we can make is that pain is not an enemy to be defeated, but a messenger to be listened to. When we treat our pain as a hostile invader, we mobilize all our defenses against it. We put up walls, dig trenches, declare war. And in this battle, we waste precious energy that could be used for healing and growth. But when we can see our pain as a messenger, perhaps a rude, unwelcome messenger who speaks too loudly, we can ask, "What are you trying to tell me?" And in that moment, everything changes. Have you ever noticed how, in a garden, plants that are regularly pruned grow stronger and more abundant? The wise gardener knows that cutting certain branches is not an act of cruelty, but of care. It's directing the plant's energy to where it can flourish best. Perhaps some of our losses, our disappointments, our failures are just that necessary pruning. Areas of our lives that needed to be cut so that we could direct our vital energy where it really matters. It's painful at the time, but over time we realize that we're growing in ways that wouldn't have been possible without that cut. One of the greatest ironies of human life is how often what we try hardest to avoid becomes the gateway to what we need most. The person who fears loneliness and does everything to never be alone may discover, when finally confronted with silence, a depth and peace they never knew. The person who fears failure, when they finally fail in an undeniable way, can find a freedom and authenticity that the constant need for success never allowed. It's as if our greatest fears hide our greatest treasures behind them. The world's spiritual traditions have always taught that suffering can be a teacher. Not because suffering itself is good or necessary, but because it confronts us with questions that, in times of comfort, we easily ignore. Who am I beyond my successes and failures? What really matters in the end? What kind of person do I want to be? What sustains me when everything else falls apart? Pain breaks the shell of routine and habit, forcing us to look at deeper truths that we normally keep at a distance. Like a torch in the dark, it illuminates parts of ourselves and life that we can't see in the normal light of day. There's a story about a man who carried a heavy stone for years. He constantly complained about the weight, the difficulty, how the stone limited his movements. One day, someone asked him why he wouldn't let go of the stone. Surprised, he realized that he had never considered the possibility. He had carried the weight for so long that he could no longer distinguish between the stone and his own hand. In the same way, we often carry old pains, hurts, and resentments that no longer serve any purpose except to weigh us down. We no longer know where the pain ends and we begin. And perhaps the first step is simply to ask, do I really need to keep carrying this? The path to transforming pain into growth begins with a simple but profound act: naming it. Giving a name to what we feel is like switching on a light in a dark room. Suddenly we can see the outlines of what was once just a threatening presence. I'm feeling abandoned. This is fear of failure. I'm experiencing unrecognized grief. It sounds simple, but this act of naming creates a small but crucial space between us and the emotion. We are not the pain, we are the ones observing and naming the pain. And in that space lies the beginning of our freedom. There is an ancient practice that crosses cultures and traditions: writing as a form of healing. You don't have to be a talented writer, just someone willing to put the contents of their heart on paper with brutal honesty. When we write about our pain, several things happen. We give form to what is nebulous, we organize what is chaotic, we externalize what was trapped inside. Modern studies confirm what the ancients already knew. Writing about difficult emotional experiences strengthens our immune system, reduces stress, and improves sleep. As if, by transferring some of the weight onto paper, our body could finally rest a little. Have you ever noticed how a physical wound needs certain elements to heal? Cleanliness, air, sometimes protection, and always time. Our emotional wounds are no different. They need cleansing. This can mean expressing the truth of our pain, even if only to ourselves. They need airspace to breathe without the constant pressure to get over it soon or move on. Sometimes they need protection, healthy boundaries, safe environments, people who respect our journey. And always they need time. There are no shortcuts in the emotional healing process. Respecting this natural rhythm isn't weakness, it's wisdom. One of the most powerful discoveries we can make is that our pain, when shared in a safe context, becomes a little lighter. Not because it magically diminishes, but because it is no longer carried by us alone. There's a reason why all human cultures developed collective mourning rituals. They intuitively knew that shared pain is more bearable. This sharing doesn't mean exposing vulnerabilities to just anyone, but finding those people, it could be one or two with whom it's safe to be real. Those who won't try to fix, minimize, or hasten your pain, but will simply be there, bearing respectful witness to your process. All wisdom traditions talk about the importance of looking after the body during times of emotional suffering. It's no coincidence. Our mind and body are not separate entities, they are a single, integrated system. Prolonged emotional pain depletes our physical resources, just as physical exhaustion diminishes our emotional resilience. That's why, in times of great pain, the most basic acts of self-care become almost revolutionary. Ensuring enough sleep, moving the body in some way that is accessible, drinking water, breathing consciously. These are not luxuries or superficial distractions. They are the foundation that allows us to do the deepest inner work. One of the most damaging lies we tell ourselves is that we need to fully understand our pain before we can begin to heal it. We get stuck in endless analysis, dissecting the past, looking for causes, waiting for a moment of total clarity that rarely comes. But healing often begins before complete understanding. Like the skin that begins to close a wound even before we understand exactly how we cut ourselves. Taking small steps towards life, even while carrying unanswered questions, is not denying pain, it's refusing to make it our only reality. There is a concept in psychology called the window of tolerance, the space where we can process difficult experiences without becoming overwhelmed. When we're inside this window, we can feel strong emotions and still maintain some perspective. When we're outside it, we either freeze or panic. Part of the art of turning pain into growth is learning to recognize the limits of our personal window. Sometimes this means taking a step back, seeking support, or temporarily focusing on stabilization rather than deep processing. It's not about avoiding pain, it's about respecting the pace that our current system can handle. Have you noticed how we often look forward to big transformations, dramatic turning points, when in fact real life changes through small, consistent steps? It's the same with the journey through pain. There is rarely a single moment when we completely get over it. There is an accumulation of small acts of courage, small choices in life's direction. Getting out of bed on a particularly difficult day. Allowing yourself to feel an emotion you've been avoiding. Sharing a vulnerable truth with someone you trust. Trying something new even if you're afraid. It's these seemingly small steps that, over time, create a new life on the other side of the pain. One of the most liberating discoveries we can make is that we don't have to wait to feel good to start living fully. We can learn to take our pain with us while continuing to move in the direction of our values. It's like a hiker carrying a stone in his rucksack. It's there, it's heavy, it requires adjustment, but it doesn't stop the journey. This approach, neither denying pain nor being completely defined by it, creates a different kind of relationship with suffering. It becomes not a wall that blocks life, but a traveling companion, sometimes inconvenient, but also the bearer of unique wisdom. There is a profound and transformative practice available to all of us, finding meaning in the midst of pain. This doesn't mean pretending that suffering is good or that everything happens for a reason. It means that, faced with circumstances we can't control, we still have the power to choose how to respond, what meaning to assign, what story to tell. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps, wrote that everything can be taken away from a man except one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's own attitude in any given set of circumstances. This is perhaps the deepest message hidden in pain, that even there, especially there, our capacity for choice remains. One of the most powerful and accessible tools for transforming our relationship with pain is simply to ask, what is this teaching me? Not to romanticize suffering or suggest that it exists only to teach us lessons, but because being here anyway, we can choose to extract from it everything that can serve our lives and the lives of others. This question moves us from the position of passive victims to that of active students, learners. What am I discovering about myself through this? About life? About what really matters? About how I want to live from now on? In these questions, pain begins to turn into wisdom. There is a particular beauty in people who have gone through great suffering and emerged not embittered, but kinder, not closed off, but more open, not hardened, but more compassionate. People who have somehow allowed pain to open them up instead of closing them down, who have used suffering not as an excuse to withdraw from life, but as a portal to a deeper way of living. These people are not special because they have suffered, many do. They are special because they chose to transform that pain into something that adds beauty to the world. And perhaps that's the final message hidden in pain, that through it we can become not just survivors but bearers of light. What we are rarely told about the journey through pain is that it is not linear. It's not a straight line from suffering to healing. It's more like a spiral. We revisit old places but with a new perspective. The same triggers may appear, the same emotions may arise, but our relationship with them changes gradually. What once devastated us for weeks now affects us for days or hours. What seemed unbearable becomes, over time, just difficult. Not because the pain is less real, but because our ability to contain it has grown. Like a muscle that, when exercised consistently, becomes capable of supporting heavier weights without breaking. There is a special wisdom that emerges when we begin to realize the patterns of our pain. The recurring themes, the old wounds that continue to be touched, the specific fears that are awakened. This perception is not about judgment, why haven't I overcome this yet? But about compassionate recognition. This is that same old pain appearing in a new form. This recognition in itself creates a little distance, a space for maneuver. We begin to see that we are not just passive recipients of pain, but active participants in the way it develops in our lives. Have you ever noticed how, in some of the most difficult experiences of your life, you've discovered inner resources that you didn't know you had? Strengths that lay dormant until they were absolutely necessary? It's as if some seeds only germinate in difficult soil. Resilience that we didn't know we had, compassion that we hadn't accessed, courage that was hidden, creativity that was waiting for the right moment to blossom. Not that we need to seek out suffering to discover these qualities, but when it inevitably appears, it brings with it the opportunity for self-knowledge that easy times rarely offer. One of the most subtle transformations that happens when we integrate our pain instead of just surviving it is how we relate to the pain of others. The person who has never really faced their own suffering tends to react to the suffering of others in two extreme ways, either with uncomfortable avoidance or with premature advice. But those who have descended into the depths of their own pain and found their way back develop a different capacity, that of simply being present, to bear witness without judgment, to offer not quick answers but authentic companionship. Perhaps this is one of the most significant messages hidden in pain. It prepares us to be more compassionate companions on the journey of others. There is a special quality in people who have passed through the fire of suffering and allowed it to refine them rather than consume them. A certain softness that is not weakness, but the supreme strength of those who no longer need to prove anything. An ability to find beauty in small, ordinary places. A willingness to laugh that doesn't come from a denial of difficulty, but from a deep understanding that life contains everything, the sharpest pain and the purest joy, often intertwined in ways that defy our comprehension. These people carry pain not as a burden, but as an embodied wisdom that informs every interaction, every choice. Have you ever noticed how some of the most beautiful songs speak of pain? How some of the most touching poems have emerged from broken hearts? How some of the most extraordinary acts of courage have happened in the darkest moments? There is something about pain that, when fully embraced, can turn into an expression of beauty that touches not only our own lives, but the lives around us. It's as if pain, when accepted and integrated, becomes a source of creativity, connection, and purpose that could not have arisen in any other way. Not that this justifies suffering, but it reveals its surprising capacity to generate new life. One of the sweetest surprises on the journey through pain is rediscovering the capacity to feel joy. Many fear that if they really allow themselves to feel their pain fully, they will be swallowed up by it forever. But the paradox is that by making room for pain, we also make room for other emotions. It's as if our heart were a musical instrument whose range increases. The low notes get lower, but the high notes also get higher. The person who has learned to be truly present with their sadness is often the same person who can experience moments of joy with an intensity and gratitude that others only glimpse. Many spiritual traditions talk about the soul, that essential part of us that observes the entire human journey, which is not defined by our circumstances, our successes or failures, or even our emotions. In times of great suffering, we can begin to feel that deeper presence, that calm witness that remains while everything else seems to fall apart. It's not an escape from reality, but a plunge into a deeper reality. It's as if the pain, by breaking through the superficial layers of our identity, allows us to glimpse something more fundamental, more lasting. Something that cannot be damaged by what happens to us, because it is the very essence of who we are. There is a curious phenomenon that many people report after going through periods of great difficulty, an almost tangible feeling that life is a gift, not in the sense of denying their difficulties or complexities, but in the profound recognition that simply being alive, being able to feel, even if it's pain, is already extraordinary. It's as if suffering removes a layer of taken-for-grantedness that covers everyday experience. Suddenly, a sunset isn't just beautiful, it's breathtaking. A cup of tea isn't just comfortable, it's a miracle of flavor and warmth. A conversation isn't just an exchange, it's a treasure trove of connection. This is perhaps the most surprising alchemy of pain, its ability to transform the ordinary into the sacred. What is perhaps most difficult to accept, but potentially most liberating, is that we never reach a point of total completion with our pain. There is no final destination where all wounds are completely healed, all issues perfectly resolved. Life keeps bringing new challenges, touching sensitive places in new ways. But what changes is our relationship with this reality. Instead of seeing it as a flaw, our inability to completely get over it, we can recognize it as part of the beauty and complexity of being human. Our pain, integrated into our history, becomes not an obstacle to be eliminated, but a thread in the rich and multifaceted fabric of our lives. One of the most significant discoveries we make over time is that pain, although never welcome, can be one of our greatest teachers. Not because suffering is necessarily good or desirable, it's not, but because it confronts us with truths that, in more comfortable times, we manage to avoid. It shows us our limitations and also our untapped strengths. It teaches us about compassion in ways that no book ever could. It reveals what really matters when distractions are removed. And perhaps most profoundly, it reminds us that we are part of a shared humanity, united not only by our joys but also by our wounds. And so we come to a deeper understanding of the message hidden in pain, that it is not just something to be overcome, but something to be integrated. It's not a diversion on the path of life, but part of the path itself. It's not an interruption in our story, but an essential chapter of it. The wise person is not the one who never suffers, nor the one who suffers without purpose, but the one who allows pain to transform them, not into someone less vulnerable, but into someone more authentic, not into someone immune to suffering, but into someone who knows how to transform suffering into compassion, into wisdom, into connection, into beauty. This is the invitation hidden in the deepest pain, not just to survive, but to flourish precisely because of what seemed for a while like it could destroy us.